but we'll see how many people actually make it in. So anyway, today we are going to be talking about a lot of different aspects of what you do in January, and in terms of pruning, in terms of planting, and all the equipment you need, and things like that. So you want to start with Les?
We'll start with Les.
So he can do his little spiel, and then we'll have Terry right after him to show you how to prune.
I'm gonna take this off, so maybe you can hear me. Make sure my hearing aids are still here. I had one die about 6 months ago, and I wanted a loaner, and she said, we don't have any loaners because everybody keeps flipping them off when they take their masks off. So.
Every day's Halloween now.
Yeah, I'm gonna just go over a few things for things to be doing in the garden right now. And Terry's gonna be the head butcher. Terry and I are both hard pruners. And when he starts pruning, some of you new people, you'll start gasping, probably.
I've had people scream in the audience.
Yeah.
This is always fun for me.
Yeah, I've always been a fairly hard pruner. And hard means that I cut my roses back at least 2/3 of their size. You cannot make if you have 10 different varieties of roses in your yard, as you know, you can't make them all the same size. They all got different genes, so they all are gonna grow in different ways. This way, some are fat, some are skinny, some are tall, some are short. So, you prune as a percentage, and Terry's gonna go over all that. I'm gonna go over a little bit of the tools. I've talked a number of times about the 24-inch TerraPots. Diane and Lou use these almost exclusively for their roses. It's the only thing I've used for many, many years. These are a lot different than a lot of the lousy cheap pots that you buy. Mine, I've had them last at least 10 years before they start to come apart, before the sun starts to degrade the plastic. First thing that happens is the rim comes off, which is probably fine, except if you have to move them. You don't have anything to hang on to. But I've been growing my roses in pots for the last 25 years, probably. None in the ground, always in pots. You can control the soil better, you can control your watering better, you can control your fertilizing better. Especially if you use the same soil mix consistently, you'll get the same drainage, the same water retention, things like that. So, I've been using Kellogg's Patio Plus potting soil for a number of years. It's available both at Home Depot and Lowe's. Patio Plus. Lou likes to add some peat moss into his and some, you do perlite or Vicky?
Perlite.
Perlite. Yeah. If you don't know what perlite is, it's a mineral that is heated and it pops up like little popcorn. And it both retains moisture, but it allows oxygen into the soil, and it doesn't break down. It'll stay there for a long, long time. If you use vermiculite, which is mica, it tends to degrade and it gets kind of slimy and doesn't hold up very well. So the peat moss is the most water retentive of any organic material. It retains water very, very well. It soaks it up very well, and it will give it back up to the plant, where a lot of the mulches that you would buy at the nurseries tend to not do that. They like to keep the water for themselves. So, good compost is probably the next one, and by good I mean fairly expensive compost or homemade. You know about that. Also, this time of year, things you want to be doing, thinking about, you should have started a month ago, planting new roses, what you're going to plant. if you've been looking online and you find stuff in catalogs and things like that, and you want to order them tomorrow. Between labor shortages, transportation issues, postal issues, tell them you want them shipped immediately. They seem to think Tucson's up in the mountains and they don't ship them here till March. Yeah, spring in New Hampshire. Or something, you know. So you want them as soon as you can possibly get them. And don't forget that every description in a catalog makes every rose sound like it's the most magical rose that ever came along. So do a little research on varieties. Ask some of the people here that have been growing roses for a number of years about top varieties. Just because a rose is new this year, first year introduction or second or third year, doesn't mean that it's good for our climate. It may be perfect, it may not. Again, if you've moved here from somewhere else, almost anywhere else, the rose that may have been your favorite rose there just is not gonna be happy here. Or if it was grandma's favorite rose, it's most likely not gonna be happy here, although it may.
I have the recommended rose list.
Okay.
If anyone would like it.
Okay, that's a good one, yeah. Some of those roses that are on the list may be very hard to find, or not available at all. The big producers, they introduce a rose, if it doesn't sell really, really well, they just quit, even though it may be a great rose, for some reason it doesn't sell well, so they may just quit marketing
The big
it.
one.
Your big wholesale growers of roses, they need to sell at least 10,000 of each variety to make it worth it. Preferably a whole lot more than that. And then sometimes they're roses that don't propagate well. When they graft them in the field, they don't get a high percentage of the uptake. So, you know, if they're only gonna get a 50 or 60% take in the field, they generally won't continue to market it. Again, it's just not economically feasible. So, order your roses. I've noticed, I was in Lowe's yesterday, and they have some actually fairly nice looking little roses in each little pot.
Really?
Only, if you run your finger up the cane, a little curl of wax comes up along it. And they do that so that it has a really long shelf life, so that the canes don't dehydrate when they're sitting on the shelf in wherever weather they get. Problem is here with our intense sun, when you throw those out there, the wax tends to melt into the canes, into the cambrium layer, and kills the roses. So be sure you're not getting any waxed roses if you're buying from the big box store. Also, don't be surprised if the peace rose you bought turns out to be Mr. Lincoln. At the big box stores, frequently the roses are mislabeled. So, and don't come into the show and whine at us that is the rose, that's the name that was on that rose. Because that may not be that rose.
They get mixed up all the time.
Yeah. Those are probably the main things right now that you want to be doing other than pruning. I like to have all my pruning done by the 10th of February. I'm a great procrastinator, but I tend to go out and just blitz it and get it done if I can. Terry's got some things up here, and I brought almost the same things.
Go ahead and talk about them.
Good pair of long gloves. These really good leather ones are fairly expensive. You can buy some at Tractor Supply and some of those places that are welders' gloves, and they do the same thing. My theory's always been if you aren't bleeding, you're not doing it right. But if you're in a situation where you're having to get in tight quarters, it's a good idea to have these longer gloves. And just a good,
Gauntlets.
decent pair of
Oh, yeah.
decent pair of plain old leather gloves These are actually blood stains on here, Mom. So,
DNA.
yeah. Wells Lamont makes them, a couple other ones make them. But I can't wear gloves when I prune, I get cramps in my hands. So I'll wear a glove on my left hand to hold the canes, and then I'll prune with my right hand. And that's been the way for about 50 years, so it's not because I'm an old fart. And a good assortment of pruners. These are Felco. I haven't used anything else for probably the last 40 years. I have 3 pairs. None of them are newer than probably 25 or 30 years old. They do have some replaceable parts. You can replace the blade. That's if you can get them to come apart. But they last, they're almost indestructible unless you try to prune something too big and you spring them. And then you end up with a gap between the 2 parts of the blades. The bypass pruners, you want ones like this that cross each other like a pair of scissors. The ones that they call them anvil pruners, where they have a flat spot and then a blade that comes down. When you cut with those, even if your blade is really, really sharp, it tends to crush the whole end of the cane, so that you end up with some dieback on the canes when you make your cuts. These are for serious work. These are about $100. Felcos are, probably find them online for $50 to $60, somewhere around
Between
there.
50 and 80, I guess, these
Yeah,
days.
yeah, they're not cheap, but if you figure out the longevity on them, I learned in the nursery that I would assign a pair and I would mark the initials of people who I allowed to prune on the Felcos, and if they lost them, they got to buy their own. They got one freebie, and that was it.
If you go to the website, Felco, they have right-handed and left-handed pruners. It's very important. If you're left-handed, you want to get a left-handed pruner. Otherwise, you won't be able to.
Much more comfortable, and they're basically just swapped around the angle of the.
Your cuts will be all messy.
Yeah.
I don't know why,
Yeah,
but
it's hard to make your hand go the way it doesn't want to go. So, but the Felcos, these are made by Corona, which was probably the second best pruner maker for many, many years. Fiskars makes some pretty nice pruners. I think these are actually Coronas, I think. But you can take care of some pretty good sized stuff with this, and you can almost kind of get in and maneuver with it. If you have to do some serious cutting, Terry's got a little pruning saw in here. Sometimes you get dead canes, especially way down low on the bush, and you can get in there with these and take those dead canes out. These are Coronas too. Coronas are about 60% the price of Felcos. And Felco makes a wide range of pruners. If you have to get down on the ground, this really helps.
and you will.
Yes. And you may get on the ground faster than you think sometimes too. So, but, I was putting frost cloth over plants the other night in the dark and tripped over a mesquite root and went flat. So did not feel good. Terry brought a electric sprayer. I brought just a little pump sprayer. Ace Hardware, any of the hardware stores, Home Depot, any of them have these. They come in 3 or 4 different price ranges for the same, like for 1 gallon one. I would not buy the cheapest one. Might not buy the second cheapest one. And be sure you store it in a shaded or dark place, because the sun will eat these up in a real hurry. Also, if you are going to be spraying weeds, you want to mark the one you're using for spraying plants. If you have less than a dozen or 15 roses, you don't need one of these.
Not really.
You don't, you know, this.
Unless you wanna irritate the neighbors.
Yeah, this is sufficient to take care of a dozen or 15 roses pretty easily. And you might even get a little quart trigger sprayer. Anything you mix should be used within 24 hours, though. Don't let it sit around. But if you're doing one for weeds and one for pesticides of some kind, put a W on it and for the weeds. I sprayed a tomato with Roundup this year. It was not happy. It almost died, now it's covered with tomatoes, like, got about 50 of them on it, so. But just one of these, they make, like I said, 3 or 4 different grades of them. Some of them have a little pressure relief valve here that you can let the pressure out. Be sure and rinse them out after you've used it, and leave the top open for a couple hours to let it dry out inside. I don't have a whole lot more to say.
All right, questions? Questions for Mr. Haight?
Probably a silly question, but when you use the pruner, do you make sure that the sharp end is towards the root so that it's not being squished by the cross piece, or just gonna cut it?
Sharp end, it's the right-hand pruner, the sharp part's up.
Okay, so the sharpest toward the root or towards the top?
Towards the
end?
top.
Towards the top, okay.
Otherwise, you're gonna have to prune like this.
Okay,
Sometimes you do have to prune like that. You
I guess the sharp part is facing downward.
okay, yeah, that's what I was
So,
wondering,
yeah, this is a right-hand.
So that the root, so the cambric layers get squished in the cutting.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
I'll do. Did you have a question?
No, I don't have a question, I have a comment. Make sure that you sanitize your blades as you move from bush to bush, because I have transferred disease that way. You just use you have those sanitizing wipes that have alcohol or something.
A Clorox wipe.
Clorox
Yeah,
wipes or
Clorox.
something like that. And when you get completely through pruning and, you know, you're all done for the day, wipe them all down really, really well, and then probably put a little drop of oil on them. These will hold a sharp edge for a number of years. This little pair of Coronas, Coronas is way old, and it's dull as can be, and it's sprung. So I have a tendency to over ratchet my pruners beyond their liking, so. That's all I can do.
I would say too, if you're gonna put your roses in the ground, that's the size hole
Yeah,
you wanna put it in.
yeah. This is a 24-inch pot. Pots are measured by their very far biggest diameter and depth. So a hole in the ground should be 24 by 24. And not shaped particularly like this. You want it to come down and then go like this, or even go like that. You don't want a hole like this. The roots of the plant grow this way, not down into a little funnel. If you're planting in the ground, I'll take another minute or two. If you're planting in the ground, again, 2 by 2 hole. After you get through, if you live in an area with a lot of caliche or rock, put about 6, 8, 10 inches of water in there. And if it's not gone in an hour, you can't plant there. You either have to dig a bigger hole or
Keep digging.
keep digging, or find a different spot. The most ideal place for roses, if you're putting new ones in, is where they get morning sun and afternoon shade or filtered sun. Do not plant anywhere near any type of desert trees, mesquites, palo verdes, even the imported low water use trees like eucalyptus and ashes, and just don't plant, I wouldn't plant within 20 feet of any trees like that. Oleanders, every time you water that rose, they're gonna say, thank you very much, and they're just gonna go over there. catch all the water.
Even desert shrubs too, like
Yeah.
those Texas Rangers, boy, they'll find that water
Yeah.
and choke out the rose.
Yeah, you
real
can have a
fast.
Texas Ranger 5 feet from a rose bush, and you can have one 20 feet away that's not getting very much water. And this one over here is just as happy as can be and just growing like crazy.
You'll have some beautiful Texas Rangers.
Yeah, yeah, roses are not good competitors with other plants. That's one idea about using pots like this. Another thing you wanna do is put the pots up on 3 bricks. So they're not sitting directly on the soil. These have really good drainage because they have quite a few holes in the bottom of them. But if you set them right on the soil, those drain holes tend to get plugged up, and the roots from their friends around them come through and grow right up into the pot. If you're gonna put them right on the ground, about every 2 to 3 months, go out and do this to them to break any roots that are coming up. You'd be surprised sometimes you'd hear pop, 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 and it's usually not the rose roots going down, it's their friends coming up. Yes?
I had a comment too on pots. All mine are in those pots there. And my husband attached the heavy-duty wheel coasters to the bottom of the pot.
Uh-huh.
We're mainly on a paved patio, so then I can just pull them around wherever I want. You know, he actually bolted them to the bottom of the pot. It's the heavy-duty ones, so.
Yeah, you have to have the heavy duty.
And if you're gonna plan to water your pots like this with a drip system, you can put your main line along and you can actually run drippers, the quarter-inch tubing up through the drain holes from the bottom, and then put your water distributor up here at the top. For many, many years, I hand water them now, but I have what they call shrub sprayers, and they're adjustable, and you can put them in there, and they will put almost a perfect circle of water out, and you can have it so it just comes within about an inch of the sides of the pot.
Where you find those size pots?
I bring them in from California. I've got 9 of them in the back of my car for somebody here tonight, so, I can order them. They're, I don't know, after the first of the year, who knows, but last time I got them, they were $30 each. Retail on these is $48.
Are you gonna be ordering?
I have connections. So,
Are you gonna be getting more?
only by order.
Do you wanna give
I
your,
don't just warehouse them at the house.
do you wanna give them your phone number if you wanna contact?
520-373-7413. And I can usually get them within a month, but it's kind of a hit or miss on the delivery.
What was that again, 520?
373-7413. And if I don't recognize the number, I probably won't answer it, so just leave me a
And then, so
message.
your name again, 'cause I don't know
Les.
you're the pot guy.
Less.
Les the pot guy.
I've been called worse, so.
Your last name isn't Moore, is it? Les Moore?
Huh? No, it's less hate.
Good.
Yeah.
So I have a question about pots.
Uh-huh.
We have a couple of roses in big, probably like a concrete. Is concrete not good for roses, or are they too hot?
I don't know that there's a good or bad about it. If they're darker colored and they're in the sun, they tend to retain a lot of heat when the sun shines on them. So that could be a problem. You know, some of those really big glazed pots that you see, the dark greens and dark blues and stuff. If the sun shines on them, go out there and put your hand on it and feel how hot that pot is. You'll realize that you're probably cooking your roots inside of it.
Okay, well, that just answered our whole.
And if you want the big decorative pots, you can take something like this and set it down inside.
But those are so much easier to move than,
Yeah.
I do mine in the whiskey barrels and, oh man, it's like moving a
Yeah,
pyramid block.
whiskey barrels are almost impossible to move. They're low and they're flat, so to get them to turn enough to put on like a hand truck or something like that, it's just almost impossible.
I have to roll them. I can't get them on the hand truck without another person.
You have to walk them some.
No, I just turn them on and just
Side, yeah,
scoot them.
Yeah.
yeah.
The concrete.
If we have to transplant one from a smaller pot to a bigger pot, is that,
520,
how hard is that?
373, 7414, I believe.
She asked about transplanting from smaller pots to larger pots. One thing you wanna do, now's a great time to do it, right after you prune,
Right.
so all of your little friends, spiky friends are gone, pretty much. And when you do go to move them, make sure you don't wanna cut the roots particularly, but you wanna loosen them up and then plant them like here. And when you replant them, bring that soil line like clear up to here, because it's gonna drop pretty rapidly right at the beginning, and then over a year, 2 or 3, as the organic material in the soil decomposes, it packs down. You know, in 3 years, your soil line will probably be down, but I repot mine every 3 years. And it's not a fun project. But this time of year, when it's really, really cool, after you've pruned, you can let them dry out. You don't want them to get bone dry, but you can let them dry out so that you're not lifting that, you know, a sopping wet root ball. And it may take a week or 10 days for them to dry out.
Les, do you put a window screen on the bottom of your pots to slow down the
No,
soil erosion?
no.
I do.
I do.
No. I do everything the easiest way.
The smart way.
Just
Yeah,
to slow
so-
down the soil going out the bottom of the.
Well, what he's talking about is also the soil, the soft soil that we use, the soil compression is pretty rapid. So to always plant as high as you can in the pot,
Yeah.
because in just a few weeks, it'll be
Yeah.
at least a couple inches
In a
down.
big pot like this, you'll get an inch drop in probably the first 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah.
So-
Oh, yeah.
So bring them, and now, you're not trying to get the massive amounts of water in there like you would in the summertime. In the summer, you want that inch or inch and a half, to fill that whole thing with water. But right now, you can hand water and you still get enough water down in there. But, and after you transplant, make sure you water about 3 times to get all of that new loose soil saturated. And right now, you know, I had right about an inch over the last 6 days of rain. I live right by the university. I talked to a couple people who've had an inch and a quarter, inch and a half. I haven't watered my roses for a week or more in the big pots. If you have roses in the ground and you're on a water system, it should not be on more than about every 4, 5, 6 days. Make sure you give them plenty of water when you do water, but, you know, if they're still on a summer water schedule, bad.
What would they look like if they are,
If they're what?
if they've been overwatered?
Yellow.
You'll get some yellowing of the older foliage on the insides. You know, there's really not any particular great signs. The problem is that, you know, if it's way overwatered, you start getting root loss. They'll just plain old rot. So,
And you'll get a lot of leaf drop too.
and you get a lot of leaf drop.
Is there any
Yeah.
saving those?
Just let them dry out, or check the drainage to make sure that it's draining okay. They won't tolerate standing in water. Those
Yeah, they
roots
don't-
have to have oxygen.
They don't like wet feet, so. And another thing you can do is take like a piece of rebar rod and push it down into the soil all the way to the bottom of the pots or the ground. And wiggle that some, because that'll aerate the soil a little bit and open it up a little bit so it can dry out. So,
Thank you.
yeah, they used to sell those old soil, what they called them, soil probes.
We still
To
sell
to
them.
be able to.
They're still selling.
Yeah, which were fine if you had sort of normal soil, but if you had real hard compacted caliche type soil, it just push on it and you go, oh man, I got
Well, I have
water.
an old one that
And
could
it-
be a spear.
Yeah,
so.
it didn't matter how wet it was, it's not going anywhere, so. But, those things work, but just a piece of like 1/2 inch or 5/8 inch rebar, you can take that and push it down in there and work it around. Probably not even a bad idea to do that kind of around the edges of your pots at this time of year. if you're not gonna repot them. Okay,
Thank you.
I shot my waters.
Okay. Thank you, thank you. Well, good, you made my job a lot easier. The only thing I would add is, sometimes if you go and to Harbor Freight and you get those welding sleeves, those are good too to have in conjunction with the gauntlet glove, give you more protection, especially if you're going in and pruning a really giant rose. And then this is a little sharpening tool, it's called a Speedy Sharp, and this really works real well on keeping the edge sharp here, and you just basically, like you're peeling an apple, you're bringing it at an angle, and there's a carbide steel edge here, and then you just sort of pull it across there, rebuild up that angle, and then you flip it, and then there's a bit of a burr, then you do it flat, and take that burr off there. But
Where did
these
you
were
get
really
those?
great. I got them on Amazon,
There it is, they have them,
Speedy Sharps,
yeah.
but that's a great little tool to have. And then as far as the spraying goes, this Atom Blast 5000, whatever this thing's called, this will put out a fog about 10 feet away. And what I like about it is it's a fine mist, and it'll get on the top of the leaf and the bottom of the leaf. So like I said, I have about 70 roses, so if I do the spraying thing, I'm going to the padded cell at Big Springs.
That's how you get
Going nuts.
That's how you get your workout.
No.
Tank up.
And then what I do for mixing, I have a white bucket, and I'll measure where 2 gallons goes. And so, see the red tape in there? So I measure in 2 gallon increments. I'll start off with, this is like a Merit 75. It's an insecticide that's also, what am I saying? Systemic. Systemic, so it penetrates the leaf and the cane. And then for a fungicide, this is propiconazole. Propiconazole. And that's, you put in that, just measure it in there per 1 gallon. Of course, I'll double it because it's 2 gallons. And then I'll take this, it's Indicate 5. It's a spreader sticker. So it has like a bright pink coloring to it, but it will, instead of the mixtures beating up, they spread nice and even, and they'll be all nice and shiny, and they hang on.
And it adjusts the pH.
And adjust the pH. So what you do is, once you've added, you've measured these out, put it in the bucket, filled it to the 2 gallon mark, then you put in about a tablespoon or 2 of this Indicate 5, and you stir it until it turns bright pink. And then you have the perfect pH, and you have enough of the spreader sticker in there. And then, for a little bonus, I put in Nature's Nog. This is a nice kelp, seaweed, iron supplement, and it's a foliar feed, and it will just make your foliage so nice and dark green. It does wonders. So you put it on last because it's really dark, and you won't be able to see, once you have the pH set, because it's gonna turn your water brown. So you add this last, but this is a really great product.
together?
All together. And then in it goes, put on your respirator, goggles, electric cord, get out there early in the morning when there's no wind. Right at dawn if you can. And then you do your spraying. And after you do your pruning, you can do that, but because I exhibit roses in the shows, you have to be at a different level as far as, you have to have perfect looking roses when you put them on the table, so. You don't have to do this. If you're not comfortable with using insecticides or sprays, the best thing you can do for your roses is just spray them off with water in the morning. You'll knock off 90% of the insects and the funguses. And you'll also blast off the grasshoppers, and then you can track them down and squish them. And definitely you'll blast off all those aphids. But
We have aphids right now.
yeah, they like the cold weather. You don't have it, or you do?
I do.
Yeah, I do
Why is
too.
it so cool? Why are there
Yeah,
bugs?
no, they're happy.
They like it.
And you got any vegetables like lettuce and stuff like that? They're,
Or milkweed.
yeah.
They like all that stuff too.
Is this
What's the
Nature's
merit
Nog?
again?
It's Merit 75 WP. It's a powder.
And you'll get sticker shock when you see the price of some of these.
Mm.
But you have to remember that you're only using like a quarter of a teaspoon or a half a
Very-
teaspoon
yeah, very
per
little.
gallon. So if you multiply it out per rose bush, it's almost nothing. It sounds
It
bad
is.
when you first start.
Yeah, the upfront cost.
Yeah, this is really good stuff. And just Google it online. I think you can still get it at rosemania.com, the Nature's Dog. But it's really good stuff. Even if you just want to use it for foliar feed, your plants will love it. Okay, now for the main event. So the reason that we are pruning at this time of year is we want to time our blooms for the exact temperature range that they're gonna really have the best roses. And that is usually when the temperatures are about 70 to 80 in the daytime, 40 to 50 at night. And those happen during April and November. That's prime time. So we have 2 blooming seasons in Tucson. The winter prune is probably the most important because you're resetting and you're restarting everything. And we'll prune these guys at the end of January. They should be done by the second week of February, because otherwise you're gonna miss the temperature range and, the best roses that you can have.
Is it too early to start now then?
If you have a lot of roses, you can start. I will probably start on a few of mine next week that I know it takes them a long time to bloom. So because I have so many, I fill that trash can up so fast. Yeah, you can, if it's like you have a big climber maybe that you want to prune, you can prune that now. But I would wait till probably the 15th if you're gonna get started.
Are you gonna talk about climbers? Cause I won't ask you now. Are you gonna talk about pruning climbers?
Yeah, I should talk about that right now.
Cause I was told by Mesquite not to prune them back radically.
No, not radically, but you do want
Just
to.
cut out the dead stuff, they said.
Well, you're gonna cut out the dead stuff, and if it's an older climber, you're gonna have those long canes.
Mm-hmm,
You wanna go up the cane to the tip and then just tip it.
okay.
And then any of those little side shoots, I usually take all that off. And if you can, bring that cane horizontal. If they bloom, if you have them going this way, like on some of those
Mhm.
trellises you're not getting enough sun exposure on the legs of the cane. If you bring them along like an espalier, like the French do with their apples, and you get more sun exposure along that cane, and you activate those flower bud eyes, and you'll get more bloom. So you always want to take the long canes, clean them up, tip them, and then just bring them down carefully, and then zip tie them and hold them onto your trellis.
Do not weave them in and out of weave them in and out of a trellis.
Do not,
If you do not, if you do that, when you go to prune it, you've got to cut it every 6 inches or 8 inches because it's,
Yeah, it's-
and if the canes get big enough, if they're
break the
flimsy
trellis.
trellises, they'll just tear them apart.
yeah.
But you said you wanna cut off the shoots that are coming off of the long canes?
If you have a nice long cane and it has those little side things, just take a look at it. If it's pencil thickness or bigger and it's coming off it, then keep that and just go to the end of that. But lash them to the outside of the trellis so you can have access to them. And if you have any like little twiggy stuff at the base, get rid of all of that. If you have a baby climber, it's gonna look like this when you first put it in, but as it matures, then it's gonna get those nice long canes coming out of it. Then you can get rid of the primary stuff and just eliminate it. Like, say this, you would just go right flush and just take this whole thing off. It's done, it served its purpose. You can see where it was cut there and it died back.
That was one of the original canes.
It was one of the original
Because
canes.
it has the tag on it probably, so.
There you go. You don't want that. You don't want that.
What
So-
rose is that?
This is a grandiflora, which is sort of like a marketing ploy for an oversized hybrid tea. In England, they don't have grandifloras, they're all hybrid teas. So,
Are you
What's the name of
videotaping this for us?
yes,
Or I'll do it myself. You're videotaping it?
I'm videotaping, yeah.
Okay. Cause I'll forget when I do
I'm
that.
peeking through. I'm trying to stay at the camera angle. So, does that answer your question about the climber?
Yeah, and the only question, cause didn't think about that trellis comment, unfortunately. If you cut it back somewhere where you have cut it through the trellis, will that won't kill the rose, will it? In other words.
It will branch right where you cut it off.
Okay, so if I've made that mistake already,
Mhm.
get rid of it and just tie it on like you said.
Right.
Yeah, so you'll be left with like the nice long canes, and any of the twiggy stuff, just get
Yeah.
rid of all that, just clean it all up.
So that's what you wanna have, is little nice, what if you have an arbor that goes over, cause that's what I'm putting in, and I wanna get a climbing rose. Do I attach those with zip ties to get it to?
I would, just train it. If you have a long enough cane, just take it up to the top, just tip the end of it and then lash it, and then it'll stay that way.
Don't pull your zip ties real tight,
Just
because
get-
as the cane grows, it'll
Cut
cut,
into it.
Okay.
it'll girdle it,
Yeah.
so,
Just enough to hold it on.
yeah.
And then another thing too, if it's a new cane, be very careful, because sometimes they'll snap at the base if they haven't hardened up enough. So
Okay,
you just gotta be really kind of eyeball it and just don't put a lot of tension on it.
okay.
But you wanna get them to go horizontal,
I did it.
ideally, so,
What does that mean?
like along the horizon, this way instead of vertical.
But if you want it to go over.
Then you don't have a choice.
And at some point, you're gonna have some horizontal
Right.
as it
that's true.
goes over.
Right,
So-
okay.
And you might look for roses that they call pillar roses.
Pillar?
Pillars are similar to climbers, but they tend to bloom, most roses are what are called apexically dominant. They bloom at the apex.
There'll be a quiz after
So,
that.
yeah. You don't have to spell it right either. And so when you have a climber, a true climber, and you try and put it on a 2-foot trellis, it's only gonna bloom at the top.
Yeah, they just sort of spray.
The
So what did you call that, apex?
apex,
Is
the
New
apex,
Dawn apex?
apexically dominant.
New Dawn rose? Do you know
Most,
that one?
most plants, most flowering plants are.
Because most of
apexically
mine are down all over the plant, not just at the top on the New Dawn, and it's
Yeah.
like,
But if you prune them, if you train it like this, and don't really have much to show here. But say this is your cane for your climber, and you've got it trained sideways, horizontally. If you take and prune to a bunch of these little short stems that are coming off, every one of those will bloom.
oh, wow, okay.
All along that
Crystal clear.
stem. If it's like this, you're gonna get half a dozen
Okay.
flowers maybe at the very tip.
Now, sometimes in Europe, they will put pillars, and they'll put the roses in there, and then there'll be like an umbrella structure, and then they just spray out over the top like a fountain. That's a nice effect too, but you have to have a pretty big rose to fill that in.
Okay.
Like you can get away with that with a tombstone rose.
Yeah, the old dark red rose, climber Don Juan is considered a pillar rose, and you will get more.
And it's fragrant too.
Gorgeous.
So, back to our little victim here. So, what we want to do is get as straight as canes as possible as we go through here. So basically, I kind of look at the bottom first. I'm going to follow this guy up here. See how it branches? And then this goes up here. Well, this cane is better than this cane, so I don't want that. So then just keep moving up
Yeah.
to the top, and any of these little twiggy guys, get rid of those. Keep going up, this one's coming off the side. Yeah,
You know, it's got, it has bugs all over it, but at this time of year, you just have to bite the bullet.
Okay.
yeah, you'll have pretty flowers, just bring them inside.
So you said severe pruning, I don't consider that severe, if you cut it down.
Oh, I'm not done yet. Don't you worry. Now, what you wanna do, when you start going up to the top of the cane, you wanna go to pencil thickness. And that will be a thick enough stem that's gonna support a nice long flower bud. So, you can go above this bud eye. There's a bud eye right here, and a bud eye is always going to be at the base of the leaf. When you pop that leaf off, that's your bud eye. And so you're going to prune just above it, and then that's where the next rose is going to come out. You see that there? But when at this type of pruning, you wanna go this, you could get by with that. That would be fine. Or you could go down here, but see here, this was a butt eye, it's been spent, this was a butt eye, that was a butt eye, but you can go down even further to this butt eye and cut there. And this is a very young rose, so if you have like one of your big roses, you're gonna go down, if you go down to that thickness, you're still gonna have a pretty big bush. Does that make sense?
What, I'm
There's
confused
a
about.
bud eye underneath every single leaf base. If you peel a leaf off, there's a bud eye underneath there.
What do you mean by being spent though?
Well, you can't see it from there, but there were places where it had grown out, where it had bloomed.
Okay.
See that little nub there? That used to be a bloom that's gone now. So you're always pruning to the bud eye.
Well, I read something where you shouldn't pull the leaves off, it might tear the stem.
Nonsense. You must pull the leaves off.
Yes, unless you're looking at an old wives' tale.
But if you have a thin stem, grab the top of the stem and then pop it down. So you're not, if you do it up top, you probably bend and break the stem if it's real thin, but you don't want it that thin anyways. So always grab the top and then pull these like so. Just pop them off.
When you pull that leaf off, if you can't really see a bud eye underneath there, if you look real close, it looks kind of where the leaf came off, it looks like a little smile with its tongue stuck out. And that little tongue sticking out is the bud eye. The later you wait to prune, the more predominant those little bud eyes are gonna be.
Okay, I'm sorry, I have to ask another question on that.
Sure.
That one you started with, you went up and you took leaves down, was that just for illustration? Or could I look at it and say, that's where I want it, and look for my bud eye and just make one big clip? Or do I have, you pick?
Either way, like I said,
It'll work, right?
I could have left that, and it would still have been pencil thickness.
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is on the next branch, you were clipping like the top and then you went back and clipped down. Can't you look at the bottom and say, right where your hand is, maybe above that? That's where I want it clipped.
You can, but right, from what I'm seeing here, like on this particular cane,
Yeah?
I'm not seeing any new bud eyes. I've seen ones that have been spent and they've had a bloom, or sometimes they get these little weird growths that don't really turn into a flower. They're just sort of like a little stalagmite or whatever you want to call them. But sometimes you just have to keep going up until you can find a good sound bud eye on a nice thick stem. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I'm just amazed that I have any flowers because I've been doing it wrong all this time.
Oh, there's more than one way to prune a rose.
I'm
They're
shocked.
very forgiving.
I was gonna say, obviously, 'cause I haven't been outside.
Now this one here, as I'm moving up, there's a little side growth up here where it probably bloomed, but now there's nothing really good to keep there and it's too thin. So any stuff like that, you want to clean that out. So you want to prune as close to the cane as possible. And you might have to pivot your blades a bit so you get, there's one side that's more narrow than the other. So you're constantly moving them around like this. But there's not much to this one. Here's another little squiggly piece here. As you keep going up, now I'm getting into, I'd like to have something here on that size of a stem, but there's nothing there. And there's some dieback there, so I see a bud eye here on the side. So I'm gonna prune to that. But this is pretty much a spent cane, and it's probably an older one. So, but I mean spent cane, like it's already bloomed out over the course of its life. But you could probably still get something off of there.
Does the angle matter? Because on the first cane, it's angled in. Do you want it to angle out? Does it matter?
You want it to be at an angle so that when you cut this, it's gonna bleed and it's gonna weep, and you want it to not sit like on a flat cut. You want it to like drain off.
But does it matter the angle this way or that way?
No,
Okay.
no. We tend to wanna prune to the outward facing bud eye so that you clean up the center and it will grow out this way.
Okay.
Like see, here's a bud eye here, that's just a perfect spot. Now, that's a little high. You could go about a 1/4 inch. And it's at an angle, so it's gonna bleed off there. Because this is such a new rose, but if you, like I said, if you have a more mature bush, and it usually takes about three years. This one is kind of thin, I don't want it. This one is, there's not many bud eyes left on it, so you might as well just get rid of it.
But usually you'll get a new one off of there, down there.
Well, you'll get new canes here at the Graft Bud Union if it's a grafted rose. This is where the new canes come out of. So, like when you're pruning to that, you want to go as tight as you can. And then you want this center to be opened up so the sun can hit this again. This is where the new canes are going to come on this Graft Bud Union. The new flowers will come up here, but the new canes will come here. And you'll notice them, they'll either be red or something, but they should be coming right off of this knob. If they're coming out from, like, say, maybe 6 inches away, and it looks like a nice long whip, that's the rootstock. These are grafted onto a rootstock. This is probably Dr. Huey, I imagine.
Probably.
But the reason they started grafting roses in the 1800s is they could get them to market in half the time, instead of growing them on their own roots. So just to speed up the process. And then different parts of the country will have different rootstocks. Northeast, you would have had multiflora. Down here, we have Dr. Huey or Fortuniana, or they're just their own roots, like that.
Is that the one though where, like, I have some that have 2 colors on them, and somebody here told me cut that part off. In other words, I have yellow with that color flower, because they've been grafted.
Oh, you mean you have,
Multicolor on one plant, and it's coming right out of the, way below the bottom there.
well below there?
Uh-huh.
But the leaves, are the leaves smaller than the normal leaf? Are the leaves different looking?
I don't
Because
know.
usually if it's a rootstock, they'll have a narrow leaf, it won't be this broad leaf here.
What color are the flowers from the bottom?
They were coming out as yellow, and it was a pink bush.
I don't know of any yellow rootstock.
I don't either.
There
Hang on to that one, you might have a rare
If it comes back, I'll take a picture.
Okay.
Roses do sometimes mutate.
That's
It's
what I
called
thought.
sporting,
Okay.
where the rose will have the exact same form, maybe the same fragrance, same foliage, but it'll have a different color.
Usually if
The genetics of roses are extremely
Well, tell us why you're making these cuts.
convoluted.
Well, because I don't like these canes, so I'm getting rid of them. They're too thin, and because this is really a new rose, some of them are like the original canes when they first grafted them and grew them in the fields. Like this was a big cane originally. You see where they cut it here,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and then they kind of tarred that off. So the one that was coming off of here was one that's not gonna really have much productivity. And you always open up the centers too, so like I said, now as I'm going up here, this one has been cut right at this point here. And there was a bud eye on the backside, and this resulted in this flower. But now, I don't know that I want it. It might have done its best already. So now I'm looking at this cane. It's coming up here, and on this side, there's a bud eye right here. I don't know if you can see it from over there. But that's gonna be a nice one. And because it's a new bush, we want to go down a little bit more. So I'll do that. And there is a bud eye on this side here, and there's one on this back side here. Can't really see because the leaves are in the way. But there's a bud eye here, and then there's one on this side down here. So I'll go to the top bud eye, okay, and make my cut. And try to keep those lines as straight as you can. Okay. Now, when you're done with this cutting, you want to clean up all the dead leaves from underneath it, because these could possibly have mildew spores or insect eggs. So you want to clean up all the area around it. And then after about 2 weeks, after that's weft out a bit, you're going to take carpenter's glue. And you're going to glue all the cuts and seal them off. Because we have a particular insect called a cane borer. It's a little wasp, and it'll drill down through that pith and it'll lay the egg, and then the egg will, I guess, eat the pith, or the larva.
The egg won't.
The egg won't.
After a week?
I know, a week or two, because if you put it on right away, it's still gonna weep and bleed out, and it might push the glue off.
It'll dissolve the glue and it'll run down the cane.
You'll have all this white
The white
goopy stuff
streaks.
going down there. So I usually give it a couple of weeks, and then glue up all your cuts, so you don't have any insects getting in there. So that's basically what you're gonna
Couple
get.
of suggestions. You saw how much he took off of there.
Yeah.
So he did almost about 2/3 of its height.
Mhm.
If you've got really big bushes, just go in with your heavy pruners,
That's what I've been doing.
chop them back,
Okay.
and to get all that stuff out of the way. Because if you're trying to prune those big long canes, when you cut them, they're gonna fall over, and you will be bleeding.
Yeah.
You know, unless you're out there in your hazmat suit, your armored hazmat suit.
Right.
So, you know, if you've got great big roses, just go in and cut them back, get that stuff all out of the way, out from under your feet, so you don't trip on them. And that
And
way,
then do the-
you don't have all that stuff in the way.
Well, another thing too, if you have a really big rose bush, go in and take out those old silver canes, and just leave the green ones, the nice fresh new ones, because they're gonna have a lot more vigor and they're gonna have more flowers. And then you just go in and with the pruning saw or whatever, just get rid of those old canes and just open it up, and, cause that's gonna force more new canes to come up.
When you get through pruning a bush, you want it to look like this. You want it to look like you just took a grapefruit out of your hand, or, you know, a basketball on a
Yeah,
big
you
bush.
should have,
So-
the center should be open,
Open.
and the canes, no crisscrossing canes.
Okay.
Make sure you eliminate those, no canes going over the center, get rid of them, just open it up like this.
And this is a really young bush, and this is the graft point down here where they grafted the variety that they wanted, down in here. Over a period of several years, this graft will start to put out those new canes. And after a couple of years, you won't hardly even see this knob here, because it will produce.
It'll get enormous on a big
Yeah.
rose.
Like on a lot of tree roses, if you buy good quality tree roses, if you look at them, they'll have at least 2 grafts and sometimes 4, because nobody wants to buy a tree rose that comes up like this and goes off to one side. When it's down to the ground, you don't notice that. But if you see it up on a tree rose, it looks really strange. So they put 2 buds, they'll bud it on 2 sides. I've seen as many as 4.
Do you prune the tree roses that much?
Tree rose is just a rose on a stick.
Just, okay.
Just shape it,
Yeah,
Okay.
just shape it,
yeah, it's the same, it's just a rose on a long trunk,
yeah.
so.
Do roses need to be mulched? The reason I ask is my neighbor told me that they like to be mulched with their own cuttings, and now I'm hearing I should be clearing it out, which I wasn't
Yeah,
doing.
we never compost this stuff, because it has the disease residuals on there and it has insect eggs.
Okay.
But they do like to be mulched, but get like either pine needle, or I get those bags of the shredded cedar mulch at Home Depot, they're about $4 a bag, and you wanna put it on thick. But now, when you plant a grafted rose, it's really super critical that that graft bud union does not sink below the surface, or you won't get any brand new canes anymore. It's gotta be up, so you're gonna plant it at this level, the level that's in the pot. I tend to plant them maybe an inch higher, because that soft soil is gonna compress. But if you do have a situation where the graft bud union has gone below the soil, you might wanna dig that rose up, get all that soil off of it and replant it and get it back up on top. And you'll be amazed how many new
So
canes will come
higher
out.
rather than lower.
Always higher rather than low. It's because of the soft potting soils that we use. So it's just a good rule of thumb, because it compresses so fast. Yeah.
I have a new rose that we planted in October. So how much do I prune it?
Is it like a little nursery rose like this? Just
Uh-huh.
lightly, just very lightly. Yeah, doesn't need a lot.
Again, get the little twiggy stuff out of it
Yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah.
What's the best way to prevent or to treat the grubs that kill my roses?
There, if you have, what's the best way to prevent the grubs?
How to treat? You
Yeah,
see them, what's the best?
we planted a couple in the ground. We have 3 in pots and 2 in the ground, and one of the ones in the ground, when we dug around it, we saw a lot of growth.
Oh, yeah, probably from all the beetles and the rain. There is a chemical that has merit. Remember that chemical I had down there? But it's called Lawn Control. They sell it at Lowe's and Home Depot. It's in a silver bag, and you'll see a grub on the front of it. You'll just it's like cornmeal is the spreader. You just spread that along the surface and water that down in. And that
Lawn
will,
control,
well, I think it's called Lawn Control
and it's
by
a,
Bayer.
Bayer,
a-
season-long grub control.
Season-long grub control, but
so
we use that
the
on roses too.
seven is a grub control, but that isn't
Mm.
season long.
Not,
I think you want the merit because
Merit?
it's a systemic
no.
and it's
And
more
it's a
effective.
granular?
No, 7 is for crawling
Ants.
insect,
Ants
like,
use it.
the larvae of moths and butterflies.
Not the one I
Caterpillar?
have, it's for
Inchworms.
grubs,
It's not gonna do much for grubs.
I really use it for my chrysanthemums because they attack them brutally.
Yeah, the best thing I found is to use that lawn control and it's in like a silver plastic bag, and you'll see the picture of the grub on there. And you just broadcast, maybe a cup around the bush and water it in.
When is the best time of the year to treat the grubs?
I would say when the weather warms up a bit.
Almost any time. Right now, they're in the soil, they're semi-inactive, so your treatment probably not gonna do a whole lot of good. But I'd say the end of mid to late February.
When we start to warm up.
Yeah, and it says season long, but that's seasons in other places than here. It says, year long or 6 months. I would tend to do it about I do it probably in February, do it again probably in late July.
You could do it after
early
pruning.
July. Most of the grubs that we have in the soil here are from the cicadas that do all the singing in the trees. They lay their eggs in little tiny branches on the tree. The eggs hatch, they fall to the ground.
Really?
What was it again, I'm sorry?
The cicadas,
It is the cicadas.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was the.
and they'll get up to about this big.
Okay,
The other one is the little brown beetles
okay, yeah.
that you see during the monsoon season. And the grubs are smaller, but they're very prolific.
Yeah.
And then if you have the great big ones, those are usually from the June bugs, the green
Yeah.
that don't come out till July. And the real big ones are from the Palo Verde beetles.
Oh.
But those are not nearly as common.
If you have chickens, they'll love them.
Yeah.
It's like candy.
The birds love them, yes.
We had a big flower bed at our nursery out in the parking lot, and we would turn it over twice a year before we planted flowers. And we'd pick the grubs out and just throw them in the parking lot, and the Greckles would come down and just snatch them out. Just
I had them
as
so
fast as
bad
you
one
could throw
year,
them out there.
I was just catapulting them with my trowel out into the street and they could fry out there.
Yeah.
And people walking by were like, oh my God, it's like a plague of Egypt, what's all this? But the birds would get them and they liked them.
Is the rules for pruning once blooming roses different than like other trees?
It is, actually. She's asking if the rules for pruning the once blooming roses are different. Like if you have a species rose, like a tombstone rose or the Lady Banksia, you prune after the bloom. And then, because it's gonna bloom on the new wood. But if you have like an old garden rose, like a Gallica or a Damask, you prune the same time, but you prune a little bit lighter. Although I
Do you
don't.
still strip the leaves?
You still take all the leaves off. Yeah, you wanna get all those leaves off.
Where can you find the Damasco roses?
I would go to High Country Gardens. They grow them on their own roots. I have a Madame Hardy, which is beautiful, and it's like 8 feet by 8 feet. It's huge, but it has beautiful fragrance.
Because I know with the Damasco roses, the petals are edible, that's how they make rose water actually.
Well, not after I get done spraying them. If you don't use those chemicals, then sure. The damask rose were grown around Damascus, and they were harvested for the oils and the perfumes and that. And they're still grown in Syria, I believe. And they're wonderful roses. And then there's the Gallicas from Europe. They're very fragrant too, and those were.
You can eat any of the rose petals. They're not toxic, other than
My garden,
What you
yeah.
put, what you put on them.
They actually make them jams.
Yeah. you can
Oh,
make-
yeah.
They can be used in cooking. There's-
Yeah, if you wanna
there's
collect the
cookbook-
heps.
There's rose petal
Yes.
cookbooks and all sorts of stuff, so.
Yeah,
And they
but-
make rose water. That was all done in the Middle East mostly.
Mhm. And Persia.
And even a liqueur.
In fact, there's a famous chicken rose dish in Persia that's like a classic, where they use, I don't know what kind of, it's not the oil, but it's something that's supposed to be very delicious.
So you prune them after they bloom?
If it's a species rose, like Lady Banksia, but if you, do you have a OGR? Old Garden Rose?
Yeah, it's Empress Joseph, it's the cooking one.
Oh, yeah, I prune them the same time.
The prune now, and just not as heavy.
You don't have to, but I mean, they can be shown stem on stem, so they can be a thinner one, but when I was growing Gallicas, I still pruned hard so I could get them nice long stems. And I'll do with the Madame Hardy too, I'll take it down by half.
When the David Austin roses were first introduced in this country, they said, oh, don't prune them very hard, leave them alone, let them grow. Well, in England, the David Austin roses, because of their weather, most of them got more than 3 or 4 feet tall. Well, they brought them over here, and especially on the West Coast, threw them out there, and they all got 10 and 12 feet
They
tall.
became climbers.
They just went. So I started many, many years ago just pruning them just like this, and they've done very
But
well.
it depends on the rose. Some roses don't like to be pruned, like brandy. If you grow brandy, it hates to be pruned. Or if you grow things on Fortuniana, it hates to be pruned. So you gotta go lighter on that. So it just depends on the rose, and as you grow it, you'll begin to know it more. And if it passed and it doesn't bloom, then you know it doesn't like to be pruned.
Oh, jasmine.
What's that?
Jasmine?
Jasmine? Jasmine, I don't know. I don't know about jasmine.
Where's High Country Gardens?
Colorado.
Oh.
I'm wondering where it's at. I was looking it up on the map and I couldn't find it.
Yeah, so, to find old garden roses that are hard to find, that's a wonderful resource. You can get some very rare roses, and they're all grown on their own roots, so you don't have to worry about, grafting. When you're in really cold climates, you want to grow things on their own roots, like up in Iowa, because if you get too hard of a freeze, this top part is gonna die, and then all you'll be left with is rootstock. So if it's on its own roots, there's nothing, it'll come back true to form. So, did you have a question?
I do, I failed to write down everything that you were mentioning, and everything else that was said, but.
Well, hopefully this will record okay, so we'll have it on our
Oh,
website.
you'll have, okay, great,
So-
all right, thank you.
So,
Does snow affect the roses at all?
they like it.
Okay.
They like
best-
the cold.
The best spring roses are usually when we've had a cold, wet winter. I mean,
So we should
pretty
have copies on this
consistently.
last week.
If we have a warm,
They like
dry-
that.
If we have a warm, dry winter, we don't have usually near as good.
I like to have good hard freezes. It's good for my irises. It's good for just about everything, except the citrus stuff.
Because our roses, as you can see with all these buds on here, our roses here, unless we get a really hard, they don't go dormant. And they like that dormant. We're actually forcing a dormancy.
This is forcing dormancy, and that's why you're taking the
Some of the
leaves.
cold weather cause yellow leaves though? Or is that-
I'm sorry again?
Some of the cold weather changes, does it cause the leaves to yellow?
That's just natural. They're like old leaves going yellow. It's just like,
Or is it strictly? 'cause
It's just like
wet?
your old hair and your old skin, and your old skin, it's gotta get rid of it at some time.
Yeah.
Winter's a
I
great
just wanna
time.
make sure it wasn't
Yeah, winter's a
overwatered.
great time to get rid of skin, so.
well, they're related to apple trees. And if you've ever grown apples, they like a good hard freeze to set them up in the springtime. If it's not cold enough, they won't seem to set blossom on them. And they're a distant cousin to the strawberry too, just for some trivia.
You cover them?
I don't cover everything. If it has to be covered in my yard, it doesn't grow.
So you don't cover any of the roses in the ground or in a pot?
Amen, sister, testify. They don't cover them, don't cover them. They need that cold. They
Now,
need that
if you're
cold.
crazy like me and have a whole yard full of tropicals and semi-tropicals,
Then you can-
Then you
Yeah.
cover them, yeah.
my yard
The
looks like.
first year I covered.
My
the roses,
yard looks like
them
a
all
cheap
up
tent
instead of
city.
big.
You're very kind
I
of
don't
them.
A
now.
homeless camp.
No, they're pretty tough. And like, unlike Vermont, we don't have near the diseases and the problems. We don't have Japanese beetle, thank God.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they grow real well here. So, any other questions for me? Any answers? Yes?
You want my check?
He's right here.
Here's our treasurer, Miss Catherine Medora. She will gladly take your money. Now we gotta auction this guy off. Somebody has to take this thing home.
I thought that was you.
So,
Pay for my membership first.
You can either pay your dues or buy a rose, right?
yeah, or both. We'll take a couple of checks. So, this is a very nice rose. It's very fragrant. It's gonna get a lot bigger.
What is it?
It's called All Dressed Up. It's a grandiflora. I think it's a week's rose. Slight
By
apple
the name, I would
fragrance.
say it's probably-
Very nice bloom. Sort of a David Austin form. So who will give me $10 for All Dressed Up? 10? Do I hear 11? 10 looking for 11. 11 right there. 11 looking for a 12. 11 looking for a 12. 20 back there. That's like a ringer. 20 looking for 21. This retailed for $45, by the way. So that's a bargain. $20 looking for 21. $20 going once. $20 going twice. Sold the American.
I gotta buy a pot.
I was gonna say, that's why I didn't do it.
Or dig a big hole. All right, you guys, thank you very much. Thank you very much. It was a nice crowd tonight. You were a lot of fun. You had some good questions.
Where are you, I'm still trying to understand where you can tell.
This is the bud eye here, but it's not really a very good example. But see how that one, that bud eye is already kind of spent, that one's sort of spent. I mean, you could go down, see, here's the bud eye here,
And you're saying.
the outward facing bud eye. Well, you do after a while. See how that was just like a sort of a nub? Whereas that bud eye is pretty green.
Maybe looking at it on here.
Take your rosa back home and just take a look. That's your bud eye. Just it's like a potato eye, that little nub.
Oh, that's right.
And well, you'll get more bloom if you look for the bud eye.
So wherever you cut, you're gonna expect things to come out
So-
okay?
This is going to come out this way. This is going to come out this way.
So nothing will come from down here.
It will. There's still bud eyes down there, but we're trying to. Yeah. Now see how here. One of the original cases, see how that's like splitting and there's some dieback? You could actually go in and just do this.
Cut it, see, that's what I'm gonna do, so.
And take that off, because that's already been cut.
Okay.
And that would be better to do it that
Do you
way.
eventually have to buy a new rose bush, period?
Yeah, 'cause I've been
Oh,
getting.
for me?
After how many years of cutting? Do you eventually have to just say it's time for a brand new rose bush?
You'll know, the rose will tell you. If it starts to decline and it's not growing well anymore and doesn't get any new canes, I should unplug that guy. Then you'll know. Yeah.
So I have a question.
Yes.
When I was here in December, both you and Les said that you had had perfect moments, and you joked about how you got rid of those because they didn't perform. How did they not perform for you?
Perfect moment, you're gonna have to ask him. I've had roses before that typically don't do well, and then all of a sudden, they had like one spectacular bloom, won the queen of show, and then you just dig the rose up because you'll never get that luck again.
Well, then I'll ask Les, because I have 2 of them,
Perfect moments?
and they have been fabulous. I mean, I cut them in October when you said to trim them back.
They're beautiful color.
I mean, I've had blooms coming out like a dozen.
Then keep it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, I
yeah,
thought,
if
is
you
it
love the
gonna do-
rose, then you
And
should
it
keep
smells
it.
good. Okay,
Yeah.
but I'm gonna learn about what makes a show rose, because I do wanna follow you guys around in April. I have that date on my calendar.
Well, you gotta come to the Rose Show on April the 9th.
Okay, it's on my calendar.
And bring your camera, and then if you see a rose that you wanna grow, take a picture of it, because it'll have the name tag on it, and then,
Well, I wanna follow around behind you and write down what you say, and then when you say put something on there, I wanna be your assistant.
okay, well, I'm
I
gonna
wanna
sign
do that.
people up for clerks.
Okay.
So, I want the new people to be clerks, so So,
Okay, very good.
I've got
That's
lots
good.
of 12,
So,
13, 14.
now that I get to take it home,
yes,
so when
But
you,
whatever resident is very.
dirt level changes, and that.
you're gonna plant it right exactly at the same level,
Okay,
but maybe higher.
but right here, after it's all settled in, you know, have this knot up
This,
above.
no, it has to be above,
Has to be.
has to stay above. So exactly how they've got it planted in here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, in fact, this looks like a new, I'm not sure that's a new cane coming out or not, but you'll see them coming out here, like giant bud eyes.
Okay, yeah, I haven't seen online, so I'll go and look at that.
Yeah.
So,
Still comes with this crazy.
and then in 2 weeks, I would put wood glue on there, right?
Yes, yes,
Yes, I am.
all dressed up.
Okay.
Hand it to you, you're in charge.
Do you have?
Quick question, do
Yes.
you think using nematodes is a good idea?
Actually, they are a good
right,
idea,
thank you.
because they will go after specific pests. If you ever go up to Arbicone in Oro Valley, they have nematodes for specific things like termites, or they go up for grubs
That
too.
specific kind of,
Yes, they have very specific nematodes if you want to do it naturally, especially if you're growing vegetables, you don't want to use a lot of chemicals. Or if you have little kids or pets, then you don't want that, or especially if you have chickens or anything like that. You don't want to use.
We need to get chickens, but he doesn't wanna get chickens.
As long as the bobcats don't get them, because all the wild animals like to eat them.
We live in the foothills, so we always see
Oh,
bobcats.
yeah, the bobcat, you have to put them in a prison, because.
And they still break into it, cause I know a couple of my neighbors that lost some chickens.
Mine friends live on the Party side, and they've had 2 of their flocks wiped out from, just like a family of bobcats.
Yeah. it would
And they
break
just,
my
they
heart.
can
I
get
love
into those cages,
Yeah.
and the poor chickens don't stand a chance. But I love chickens, they're so cute.
I do too. They have personalities too.
They do have
Is
personalities.
this the website you told me about?
Like I say, I've been by.
High Country Gardens, yes, I think that's it.
No.
No.
High Country Roses.
Oh,
High Country Roses, oh,
High
thank
Country
you.
Gardens is another place to find a lot
Okay.
of fun stuff. They've got a lot of native, I need to put an order with them. So, yeah. no,
High Country Roses, I'm sorry, you're right.
Okay, well, thank you for clarifying, because
Thank
I've
you
been
very
looking
much.
for this rose for a very long time, and we use it for food, so I figured, we might as well plant something we're gonna eat.
Oh, yeah,
Enjoy the
because you
beauty
wanna
of it.
collect the heps, so you won't deadhead, your roses, you'll let them, get pollinated and grow the seed pods. And the heps is what you really want,
Yeah.
because they're full of vitamin C.
Yeah, no, it's awesome.
Yeah, and then
Thank you.
then you would harvest them in the fall, or the next spring when you prune them back.
Well, thanks a lot, I really
Yeah,
learned a
I
lot
love
today.
Damascus roses, they're just beautiful, and they're so fragrant. They're so fragrant, they're
Yeah.
lovely.
They're actually called jewelry in Syria, jewelry, like jewelry.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you very much again.
Thank you very
so
much
much.
for
Have a
coming.
great night. Thank you very much.
Right.
Oh, I don't want the bell. This is what I want. It's a lot more fun.
All right, it was wonderful to have so many people. Yeah.
It's wonderful. You guys, take some cookies home, please.
I will.
They're oatmeal raisin. So,
Thank you.
thank you, thanks for coming. So, I went over the board schedule and I added 2 new, categories now, so, like an extra judges thing, so. But Jerry Mahoney's working on the arrangement and I think photography. Donald is doing the Donald, but Jerry Mahoney's checking the schedule
Oh,
to see,
okay.
because they've changed some things and
Okay.
all that stuff. And then when, we gotta coordinate with Judy when we can get to the bank and get everything transferred
So
around.
I can't do anything for 2 days.
Oh, that's fine.
I have to take it easy. No, I could go to the bank, but they won't let me go hiking, play golf, do any activities.
Oh, that's
From
fine.
my little surgery.
Oh, well, no, that's fine, but, we can even do it next week.
Yeah, whatever, so.
But, I'll try and coordinate it with Judy so that we can all 3 be at the bank.
Yeah,
Where is this Bank of America? Is it St. Philip's Plaza?
Her Bank of America's right near her house, so she lives by,
She's near
Sullivan.
Campbell.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's in that, St. Paul's Plaza.
So it would be easy for, it's better for us to go there for her.
I think so.
Yeah, it's the nice thing to do.
No, no, no.
So I don't
Because
mind
she has to
that.
go to the bank anyways,
Yeah.
because she physically has to transfer stuff around.
Yeah.
Take some cookies for God's sake,
for a membership?
as many as you
Who made
can.
these cookies?
I did.
You did?
Well, I made them today because I
I have
thought
one.
we won't have trees, so.
Yeah, are you sure?
I know. We're still doing that thing where if you join like September, October, whatever, just.
If you join in the fall, then you have a whole other year,
Oh, actually, you're good.
because that's more fair. It's just more fair.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
thank you.
That's very informative.
One other point. Suzanne told Liz that she was through doing claims,
Oh, yeah, that's, Liz told me that too, so.
so, yeah.
Right.
I don't blame her. You guys have been in the traces for, well, decades.
She's
Did you
been
wanna-
clerk for the last 10 or 12 years, I think, so. All right,
A plus on the cookies.
nice to see you.
It's my, one of my mom's old recipes.
Oh, delicious.
They're from scratch.
They're really wonderful.
Oh, good.
Thank you.
Do you
I
want a
thought
board
they had
meeting
flowers.
next Tuesday?
We have to do it on either, Monday or Wednesday if we have Army Mulholland. Because she said she'll be membership chair,
Alright.
but she's traveling back and forth to, thanks Les so much,
See ya.
back and
I
forth.
hope I didn't butt into it.
No, you were perfect. No. You made my job a lot easier.
Y'all were great. Thanks so much.
Thank you. I'll turn this thing off.